Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Talks Daily podcast, where every day we bring you a face-to-face with the most innovative minds in the worlds of technology and business. And today I'm honoured to introduce a guest who has seen firsthand the slow progress of digital identity management. He's been observing this for the last 20 years, and he's been pushing the boundaries for a future where passwords could be a thing of the past. And let's be honest, that's something we can all celebrate, right? And here's the CEO of ForgeRock, a global digital identity leader working with giants from HSBC to BBC here in the UK, and recently steered the company to going public on the New York Stock Exchange. And having raised over $250 million in venture funding and boasting more than 2 decades of expertise in enterprise security, let's just say Fran is here to share insights on the evolution of authentication, the challenges organisations face in scaling identity management, and what that road to a passwordless future looks like. But as Doc Brown said in Back to the Future, roads, where we're going, we don't need roads. So buckle up and hold on tight, because I'm going to beam your ears all the way to San Francisco, where Fran is going to share his insights today. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Fran. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Great. Thanks, Theo. Thanks for having me. Yeah, my name's Fran Rosch. I'm the CEO here at ForgeRock. We're a digital identity company. So we work with large enterprises to create identity experiences that are both simple and safe. We work with organizations like the BBC, British Petroleum, Hargreaves Lansdown, and HSBC, just to name a few. We're really focused on cloud platform and delivery, and a really exciting time to be in digital identity.
Well, it's a huge pleasure to have you on the podcast. And one of the first things I always try and do is take my guests back in time, learn more about the origin story, what lit the spark in them for that love of technology and business, etc. So can you tell me a little bit more about your journey into the tech industry and what led you up to your current role as the CEO?
Absolutely. I'm going to kind of go backwards. I've been at ForgeRock now as the CEO for a little over 5 years.
Yeah. Prior
to that, I spent about 8 years at Symantec, doing different parts of enterprise and consumer security. Prior to that, about a decade at VeriSign, doing a lot of identity authentication. So a couple of jobs before then, but kind of not relevant. They make me seem too old. So I kind of focus on that last kind of 25 years or so in cybersecurity and identity. And I think what really motivates me is that I still think there's so much that we can accomplish, across everything with cybersecurity, but particularly in identity. I think there's, a lot of things we can do to improve both the user experience as well as the user security and privacy. And that's really what motivates me, having been in this business for so long, but still sees a great opportunity to drive improvements.
Love that. And I was reading before you came on the podcast today that throughout your career, one of the things that does bug you somewhat is that you've seen disappointing progress in enterprise identification management throughout the last 20 years. So can you share your insights on that and why you think progress has been so slow and what improvements are necessary to improve that?
Yes, it is something where I think that, I've been disappointed in the progress that we made. And, sometimes my parents who were in their 80s and 90s, they ask me, what do you do? What do you do again? And I said, well, I help these identity experiences like creating usernames and login and password authentication. They're like, well, what are you doing? Because it's not very good. Like, I got way too many usernames and passwords. They're really too hard. So they're like, we're not really that proud of you, if you're not doing more. So I just think, when you think about it, usernames and passwords were first invented in 1961. That's a long time to be using basically the same paradigm for this long when nobody likes it, right? Nobody wants to create another username and password. And it's not secure because everybody uses the same one. They write them down. They don't use password managers. So, right, there's just not been enough improvements. Now, there have been some. When you think about it, there's a lot more self-service capability than there ever was. You don't have to talk to anybody to go through those identity experiences. We're starting to use the phone and the biometrics on the phone more. MFA has become a lot easier. I remember the days you used to have to carry around a physical token. You don't have to do that so much anymore. So there have been incremental improvements, but I think there's a lot more that we can do.
100% with you. And as you said a few moments ago, you've been the CEO for 5 years at ForgeRock now. And one of the things that attracted me to you, one of the reasons I had to get you on the podcast, is because despite all the doom and gloom that we all see on our news feeds, you consider yourself a techno-optimist. So that's incredibly refreshing right off the bat. And I'm curious, what have been some of the most transformative changes that you've observed in the authentication space over this period? Because so much has changed, hasn't it?
You're right. And I have moved from being a little bit more of a pessimist to definitely an optimist over the past, year or two. And while we haven't made the kind of progress that I would like, or many people would have liked to see over the past couple of decades, I actually think we're at the precipice of a dramatic improvement, of a dramatic change. Because even though the experience hasn't changed that much, we as an industry have been doing a lot of investment that I think is about to pay off. When you think about investments that we've made in PKI, in digital certificates, right? They continue to be a foundation of identity, but they're so much easier to use than they ever were. You think about standards like the FIDO Web Authn standards that have been, started in 2010, now are just really getting traction with Google and Microsoft and Apple embedding it into their devices. 10 years ago, not that many people had smartphones. Everybody does today. So I think we've laid a lot of work done on open standards. So I think we laid the groundwork for two dramatic changes to happen in the next couple of years that will fundamentally improve both user experience and security and identity. And the first is going passwordless. And I think it's time to do that, whether you're an employee at a big company that has dozens of passwords, has to log in every day to do your job and get access to the services you need, whether you're a consumer who's shopping or banking or getting healthcare online, it is now possible to go passwordless. And there are better ways to identify and authenticate somebody and remove a lot of friction while actually improving the security. So we think the time is here to go passwordless. We also think the time is here to actually, go have a single identity, or you bring your own identity to a relationship. When you think about it today, Neil, everything you do online is a separate identity. Your bank, your shopping, your healthcare, your gym, everything. Why can't you have a single identity? In the US, when we go to TSA, right, or we go around the world with our passport, we have one password that works with every government. Why do we don't create a new passport every time? Why do we create a new identity every time? So we think that this idea of bring your own identity or self-sovereign identity, where you store your verified credentials in a wallet and you just take them out of your wallet for whoever wants to see them. Those are the two biggest changes. You're going to have a single identity that you can leverage across a network of websites, and the authentication will be frictionless, where we remove that whole concept of reusing your password. So I'm optimistic because over the past 20 years, we've made investments of an industry that are about to pay off big time as we radically improve this experience and security.
I spent some time in Estonia recently, and although it's a small country, they've managed to have 99% of all government services online. And the reason, or the way they've been able to do that, is everybody has a digital ID. They have that in place right now. And I think the only thing you can't do at the moment is that 1% is get divorced. But next year that is changing. So 100% of government services will be available online. And I suppose where I am in the UK, where you are in the US, it's getting everyone signed up and accepting a digital ID. Do you see any challenges there?
I do. Look, Estonia is a great example of success there, yes. But they're also very unique, right? In the size of their country, in the trust the citizens have in both technology and the government. That's not consistent around the world. I think of the US, I think the UK is somewhat similar. Yep. And people not necessarily trust government to run their single identity, right, and protect that information. So I think there's going to be much more of a network of identity providers. The government may be one, finance banks may be another, telcos could be another, the dreaded social media could be another, but there is going to be much more of a set of identity providers where you can go to register, create a wallet, put your verified credential information, much like they do in Estonia, but instead of one, have multiple. And that's going to be somewhat of a challenge because every website then is going to be able to trust separate ones. But there is a framework now over the past several years with open standards that can make that work. And so we think it's going to happen just in a little bit more of a distributed way than it does in countries like Estonia.
And if we look beyond there, I'm conscious I'm asking you to look into a virtual crystal ball here, but how do you envision the passwordless future? How are you and your team at ForgeRock building solutions towards that end, using things like biometrics and AI-powered risk profiling, etc.? Because these are the kind of things that we're seeing more and more of, right?
Yes. I think the passwordless future brings two benefits: frictionless, easy access with improved security. So let's talk about how we do that, right? I think, Neil, it's important to look at kind of two different use cases when it comes to passwordless and identity. One for employees, or what sometimes we call workforce, and one for customers. And they actually have quite different challenges. When you think about the challenges on the workforce side, it's typically that as employees, especially of enterprises and larger enterprises, they can actually have to access dozens of different applications, sometimes over 100 different applications to do their jobs. And some of those applications can be quite old and legacy. They speak all different languages and protocols. So enterprises have to really figure out how to create passwordless to all of that network. And what we've done at ForgeRock is really be able to create a solution that can plug into a very hybrid, complex environment of mainframes, legacy on-prem apps, cloud apps, everything password. That's a really huge challenge, but huge benefits in worker productivity. On the consumer side, it's slightly different because on the workforce side, you have somewhat control of the device that the user's using. Even if it's their own device, you can still register and understand that concept. At a consumer, if you're a bank like HSBC, you can imagine the mass proliferation of their differentiation of their customers. And you've got to be able to find something that's user-friendly and easy to understand for all those different customers to log into what's typically just a couple of banking applications. And that's really on the consumer side where open standards have just really made so much progress. And I just have to applaud the FIDO Web Authn team who came up with these standards and then drove adoption by Google, Microsoft, and Apple to embed in their devices so we can use passkeys unlocked with biometrics as a much better way than a password. And I think that we focus so much on the experience, but it's improved security. And to be able to use other signals of user device behavior, possibly with the help of AI and ML, it's a smarter, better way to recognize the user than some static password that we all know is for sale on the dark web.
100%. And we've already talked about the Estonia example and some of the challenges around governments being in control of things like this. But I'm curious, what other major challenges or equally opportunities do you see for organizations and governments in scaling identity management for millions and millions of individuals and devices and things, etc.?
It's a great question. I think there are three kind of main challenges. And I'm sure you do a lot of podcasts, Neil, and you probably don't get through halfway through many of them without someone talking about AI.
Yeah.
And look, I think it's both an opportunity and a challenge. And, still so many enterprise security breaches are driven by compromised credentials. Somebody steals the username and password of an employee who then gets access to the enterprise, takes over a server and creates havoc. And I think that, AI and a lot of times those credentials are gotten through phishing. And I think phishing is going to become so much more sophisticated with things like ChatGPT. The types of emails or even deep fakes and voice or visuals, I think it's going to be harder and harder to trust anyone's identity because of the likelihood that it's been compromised somewhere along the way. So, AI is going to continue to target older people, get those credentials. So it's just another tool for the cyber criminals that makes our job in security harder. But I also believe there's an opportunity to fight fire with fire. And just as the cyber criminals are using the latest technology to get smarter in their malicious attacks, we can also leverage AI to be able to recognize, the signals of user and device behavior, recognize a legitimate user and give them frictionless access, while also recognizing with deep data analysis that this may appear like a legitimate user, but it really isn't. And then blocking that actor at that point. So I think AI is both, again, a challenge as well as an opportunity. And overall, certainly the challenge of security for enterprises just continues to grow. Scams, phishing, ransomware attacks, all of these things are huge problems. And very often, the root of the problem starts with a compromised identity. So just continuing to ramp up security. And the challenge with that sometimes is enterprises can then develop a proliferation of dozens of security tools that all create their own alerts, data. How do they really put that together to get a single view of their risk and really be able to attack, their weak points? I think the last one, say is a little bit around the concept of scalability. Identity touches every single application within an enterprise, and it touches every single user, every employee, every contractor, every business partner, every customer, every consumer. And as you rely more and more on your identity solution, right, to make this frictionless access and to drive security in a zero trust world, it requires so much scale and performance and reliability. So companies have got to find a solution to really meet those needs and requirements.
And I'm curious, outside of that, do you have any thoughts in particular on the impact of significant technological transformations we've seen in recent years? And by that, I mean things like the Ring doorbell, digital voice assistants in our homes. This kind of technology is in every aspect of our daily life now. So any comments on that? And also why we're still dependent on flawed passwords. It's, again, a topic that keeps coming up even now. People are still using password or PA55 word, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are really two challenges in why we're still stuck backwards and how things like the Ring doorbell have taken off, right? One is technology, and second is the people, and their willingness and likelihood to change. I mean, we recently completed a study and to try to collect some data about this, from customers, like why weren't they changing? And one of our studies indicated that 59% of people still rely on memory to store their passwords instead of using a password manager. I mean, it's crazy that technology's been out there. People are not adopting it. Another thing we have from that, almost 1 in 2 people feel they need to know how something works before they're going to adopt it. And sometimes technology can be hard to explain. Have you ever tried to explain the concept of a public and private key pair to somebody that doesn't have a technology background? It's something we take so for granted. So when I think about this challenge, I think we've solved half of it. I think the technology now exists to radically improve this sector of technology. And now it's about change management. And we have to be able to explain to people, whether they be employees or partners or customers, that there is a better way to do things and that they can release and let go of this old way and adopt something new. That's been happening incrementally. I mean, 10 years ago, people probably wouldn't use Face ID to unlock their bank account. They do that today. But we have to explain more. And I think you can get to this point where you have the early adopters, and then it sort of just explodes in broad usage. And I think that's kind of we're at this inflection point where I think we've solved the technology. We've got the early adopters out there, and now we're going to see this explosion. But that change management has to come to explanation, guiding people along the journey, explaining the benefits. And I think it's a really exciting time.
It really is. And I think the last time I spoke to anyone from ForgeRock was back in 2019. But of course, since then, you guys have gone public. So I've got to ask, how has going public changed your acceleration towards things like innovation? Any big changes since going public?
Absolutely. I think, 2 big changes. So we're now, I guess, approximately 50% larger than we were 2 years ago. And when we say that, that's 50% larger in terms of numbers of customers, revenue, and size. But we've been funneling that growth back into innovation. So we've been continuing to hire dozens of new engineers, dozens of new customer success people over the past couple of years as we continue to invest in innovation. And going public help us continue to grow and get the resources we need to invest in innovation. So that's been a really big advantage for us. Also, we have had good uh, uh, visibility, that helps with visibility being a public company. And given that we tend to work with some of the largest enterprises, I mentioned companies like BBC, HSBC, they kind of prefer to work with a well-capitalized public company. So I think those have been some really great advantages and given us the ability to attract great talent. So I'm really glad we went IPO when we did back in September of 21.
And it's quite amusing. If I go back to my IT days and several years, over 5 years ago now, but even back then, one of the biggest requests from the boardroom was always, can we have less passwords? Because can we have single sign-in and just remember one for everything? And we'd explain the security implications of going single sign-on, etc. And even now, we're still talking about going passwordless. And I think we are getting so much closer, and I agree with everything you're saying here. So finally, what advice would you give to any other company, board member or tech department that are preparing for a future where the passwords no longer exist? What advice would you offer, and how can they effectively navigate this transition? Because there's going to be a few challenges along the way, but any advice you can offer on how we can start preparing for it?
Yeah, I gave a presentation recently and I titled it, Fasten Your Seatbelt. Yeah. And I think that's something that is both the US and the UK where, you have to accelerate. You're going to have to be moving fast and you have to fasten that seatbelt and move. And that would be my advice to any company. Now is the time. Don't delay. Your competitors are going to be doing it. And eventually your customers or your employees, part of the reason they have loyalty to a company or a brand is because of this experience. And so if you're going to compete and win, you got to go. So whether that's your employees, there's ways to take, well, you mentioned single sign-on and now put that on steroids by going passwordless with those employees. Look at what you can do around the FIDO2 passkey model for your customers. Now is the time to do that. And I would just say, go, investigate, move forward because your competitors are doing it, and fasten your seatbelt, move forward as quickly as you can. And cautiously, and bring your people along with it. But I think delay is not okay at this point.
Fantastic advice. So we began our conversation talking about your origin story, what put you on this path. And now as we've come full circle, I'm going to ask you to look back now and think about a book, a song, a movie or TV show, anything at all that might have influenced you throughout your career or just meant something to you or sparked an idea. All I'm going to ask is, what would you like to leave everyone listening with today and why?
So, I'm going to go with something I've recently seen. And it's a television program called The Bear. And I can't recommend it highly enough. And I think a lot of people think of it as a cooking or a restaurant. It is absolutely a business guide, in my opinion, because there are these 2 seasons and it's all about business transformation. It's all about, in this case, taking a meat sandwich restaurant in kind of working class Chicago that this top chef inherits and pulling together this diverse team of people, creating a culture and transforming it from what's kind of a falling apart business to a stable business. And it's so interesting because it's about leadership and how you lead a team through that dramatic change. And this restaurant, they have people who want to hold on the past and not change. They have other people who are like, we got to change like tomorrow and go. And as a leader, I know you always have that in an organization. How do you find that path that brings everyone along? How do you paint a picture that everyone can feel part of a vision going forward? And there are going to be down times. I mean, tough times. There are times like the restaurant's melting down and you see what leadership is about. And then in the second season, it's about taking then what's then a healthy business and transforming into a fantastic business by just breaking down all the paradigms and thinking differently. And how you invest in individual people so they can become better team members for the whole. So I love the show. I love the acting. I love Chicago and the music in it. But look at it through that lens of business transformation and leadership and people development. I think there's a lot of benefits in that show.
Yeah, 100% with you. Great show. Highly recommended. And a killer soundtrack too, right?
Yes. I'm all about Wilco and all the other dudes in there. It's fantastic.
Love it. And for anyone listening, just wanting to find out more information about anything we talked about today, maybe want to look at the work that you're doing at ForgeRock, contact your team, etc., stay up to date with some of the trends and things you're working on, where would you like to point everyone listening?
Yeah, great. You'll certainly ForgeRock.com. Our website is kind of a single point for all of our information. You can follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Twitter, the social media, but, reach out. We love to talk to you. We've been doing a lot of investment in identity. We're ready to change the world, and we'd love to work with great companies to do that.
Wow. Well, love chatting with you today, and pure gold for me. And one of the things that I was thinking as we were talking is, yes, we have been talking about going passwordless for years, a decade, as you mentioned. And I think things like incremental improvements in the user experience, like more self-service options, have indeed helped to improve a more seamless and secure experience. But now, we're nearing a world where you will never have to log in again. I think we should all just think about that for a moment, because that is where we're heading. And just thank you so much for being the tech optimist and bringing that vision to life today. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil, and to never having to log in again.
Wow, what an incredibly cool guy. It's always fascinating to delve deep into the worlds of identity and security, what a passwordless future will look like, especially with someone as experienced as Fran at the helm of ForgeRock there. The discussions on the passwordless future and the challenges of scaling identity management has given me so much food for thought, especially with the rapid advancements in biometrics, AI and IoT devices. I think it's clear that we're on the cusp of that significant transformation in how we perceive and manage digital identities, and what that means about the prospect of a world without passwords and the innovations that lie ahead. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because I know as soon as I start mentioning words like digital IDs, people get very, very touchy, and for good reason. So we do have to do things ethically and responsibly. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do we get to that ideal destination of a passwordless future. And if that's too heavy and serious for you, hey, how about we talk about what your favourite song is off the Bear soundtrack, Season 1 or Season 2, whether it be Wilco, Nine Inch Nails, REM, the list goes on and on. I'd love to hear what you thought of the show and what particular songs you like from it too. Please let me know by emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, @Neil C. Hughes. Nice and easy to find. Drop me a message rather than just passively listening to me waffle on in your ears. Speaking of which, it's time for me to go now. So thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.